Hola, hola. Welcome to another episode of the Money Chisme podcast. Today, I have a guest with me. It's Rita Soledad from Wealth Para Todos. And yeah, we're just going to talk some finances and especially dealing with self-care. Hola, Rita. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited because we usually talk about like finances, but we forget about the self-care aspect of it. And so I'm really excited to get into that. But before we get into it, like tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and a little bit more about you.
Yeah. So everybody, I'm Rita Soledad Fernández Paulino. I always like saying my entire name. You can call me Soledad, you can call me Sol, or
Yeah.
Rita Soledad, the way Violeta did
Mhm.
at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
I am a money and self-care coach. I have my own company called Wealth Para Todos, where I help Black and Indigenous people of color, women, and LGBTQ plus folk create a financial plan so they could retire early. I want us working because we want to, not because we have to. And I want us
Mhm.
to do it in a way that honors our wellness. I don't think that you have to hustle and grind and push through in order to build your financial security. And I believe that because of my own experience. Before I started my own business, I was a math teacher, a public school math teacher. And in 2019, I got sick. I got so sick, I had to be put on a medical leave and started collecting disability checks. It was
Mhm.
the same time that my husband's company shut down. And there we
Wow.
were, I was 32 with two kids living in Los Angeles. And the only money that we had coming our way was my disability check.
Mhm.
And I was scared. I was nervous. I didn't know how we were going to continue to pay all of our bills. Yeah, my husband was going to look for a job and he was applying for jobs, but the
Mhm.
only guaranteed income we had was the disability checks. And
Yeah.
that's when I started to learn about personal finance. So I was
Mhm.
32. I had gotten a bachelor's and master's from NYU. I was educated, como dicen, right? Like I had done all
Yeah.
these things and I was teaching math. And yet I was never taught anything about personal finance. I wasn't taught how
Wow.
to budget. I wasn't taught about how to save, how to pay off debt, how to invest, none of that. So at
Mhm.
32, I started just reading personal finance books and personal finance books. And as I did that, I learned how to budget. It took me a long time. I always tell people it took me 8 months to figure out how to create a sustainable budget because I would start and my perfectionist tendencies would cause me to be like, oh, I'm not good at this. I give up. But I just
Yeah.
stayed committed to keep coming back to it. And eventually I learned how to budget and we ended up paying off $23,000 of student loans that we
Nice.
had that year. So I was like, I want to
Yeah.
become debt free before I turn 33.
Uh-huh.
And so we paid off those student loans. And then I started thinking, what else can we do? And I was like, what if we
Mhm.
started investing for early retirement? Because I had read all these books.
Yeah.
And fast forward to now, where despite having that experience at 32, I'm now on track to retire early by the age of 47.
Yeah.
And it's because of learning how to engage in the wealth building cycle, which is something I teach
Mhm.
my clients in a way that also honors my wellness.
Nice, nice. I want to just go ahead and just call you Sol because if you watch this on like YouTube or like see the reel, you could see that the soul is like hitting her. So it's like very fitting. It's like, oh, the perfect. The soul came out for Sol. And so, yeah, I do want to go over a little bit on the disability portion just because I'm a little bit curious because I did just had an interview with somebody that also had that. And I'm curious, like, how that process was for you. Was it like you said you were a teacher, so was it something that came through that?
No, I had to apply for
Uh-huh.
disability outside of, I had something that helped me at the time was that I was one of these teachers who always went to school no matter what, even though I
Mm-hmm.
was, because I was like taught that have a
Like,
strong work ethic and like that
uh-huh.
was so honorable. And so luckily I had a lot of sick days. So that supplemented some of my disability income.
Mm-hmm.
However, before you submit your papers, and then it could
Yeah.
take, I don't remember the exact amount, but I want to say at least 6 weeks before you
Yeah.
actually get your first check. And
Oh
when you
wow.
get it, it's only a portion of your salary. I
Mm-hmm.
want to say that mine was like 60%. of my
Mm-hmm.
salary. And
Oh,
so
nice.
that, that was very challenging. And I think also for me, I started working at the age of 13. And
Mm-hmm.
so to now be in a place where I couldn't work, that like messed with my mind. It messed
Yeah.
with like mental health.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like you're used to in our culture, like our cultures beat that into us, like tenemos que andar, like go, 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 a ver what's the next thing and everything. And then a lot of us have a hard time when something does happen that we can't continue. We estamos like, what? Because like not the same, but kind of similar because it happened with me with school that I'm like so ingrained to like keep pursuing school. And so once I finished my bachelor's, I was like, okay, next up, master's, right? That's the next step. Pero when I was gonna go pursue that, there was a roadblock, they weren't gonna let me use the tuition assistance in the military just because of some criteria, which they changed the next year. But by then I had always like, I had already like, okay, it's okay to like back off. But I had such a hard time because I was like, what am I doing? I'm supposed to be progressing. So it was kind of hard for me to just be in limbo. So how was that for you? Like, how did you get through that?
Yeah, it was very challenging. I think the universe wanted me to learn that my value isn't tied to what I do, what I produce,
Mm-hmm.
and how I show up for others.
Yeah.
And I had to get sick and lose so much of my independence in
Mm-hmm.
order for me to see that we all are valuable and worthy of so much love and compassion, separate from what we are accomplishing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
to get to that point, I was in therapy.
Oh, yeah. I feel like yeah, therapy has really helped me too, especially with that anxiety that you get. Because I think that's part of it too. We get that anxiety que we're losing out on something or that we're falling behind because we got to go to the next thing and the next thing that's better and better, better, or chasing the career or whatever. Which brings us to the topic of like your philosophy is doing like self-care into financial freedom. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So while working with clients and even just like myself, right? Because
Mhm.
my husband and I, we paid off $23,000 in student loan debt. Then in 2020, we saved $30,000 for an emergency fund. It was a 6-month emergency fund. We maxed out his retirement account. We maxed out my Roth IRA. And then we just have been increasing our net worth by so much in just a little bit of time because in May of 2020, our combined net worth was like $125,000. And
Mhm.
now here we are in, what are we? November
20, yeah, yeah,
2024.
yeah. It's almost 2025. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Well, it might be on
And
by
then
the time
listen,
this gets out.
right.
Yeah.
But it's November 1st,
Yeah.
2024, and our combined net worth now is more than $800,000.
Oh,
And
wow,
so
nice.
in 4 years, our net worth increased so much. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was really reflective, like, how did we do it? Because if I could like really create a process of how we could do it, then I could also share it with other people. And so I realized in our journey of increasing our net worth, we focused on our money mindset. So
Mm-hmm.
starting to evaluate and get very cute and curious with all these beliefs and thoughts that we had around money. Por ejemplo, one thought that I had growing up was like, don't make more money because then you're just gonna have to pay more taxes.
Yeah, that's very common. You're right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Another one was get the best deal. Don't spend too much money. Save on rent, save
Mm-hmm.
on your clothing, spend as little as possible, right?
Yeah.
And with a lot of pride in that. Like my till this day, my mom and my tias, they get together and they're like, oh, look, how much do you think I paid for this? And it's always
That's
like
sweet.
bragging of like how barato, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those were some of the money beliefs. Also, that investing in the stock market was gambling,
Mm-hmm.
that that's not safe. That's just throwing money away. So these were
Yeah.
some of the money beliefs that I had to acknowledge that maybe they were not true. Another one was
Yeah.
like credit and like avoiding debt, which in some ways like can be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
To not have to pay interest. But at other times it's like there's a lot of people out here leveraging debt to build wealth.
Mhm.
And so these little money beliefs were really impacting. So poco a poco, I had to be like, well, maybe it's okay if I stop believing these things.
Mhm.
And I remember when I opened up my Roth IRA, I was so nervous because even my husband was like, so this sounds sketchy. I don't know anybody with a Roth
Yeah.
IRA. I don't know about this. And I was like, no, I've been reading a lot of books and all these books talk about it. And hey, it's even on investor.gov, and that's a government website. And I read about it on the IRS website también. Like, I think it's legit. I think it's legit.
Uh-huh.
And I was like connecting with people online and learning about people who were talking about Roth IRAs. And
Yeah.
todavía, like, you never really know. You never really know if your mom doesn't have it, if your sister, your cousins, if nobody that you actually like go and eat food with has it,
Mhm.
then it still feels not 100% safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have a video of me when I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it with $2,000. If things don't work out, things don't work out, but I'm gonna
Yeah.
try. And now, like, my Roth IRA has grown so much money. Now I talk
Yeah.
about people like investing in a Roth IRA all the time. But I remember in the beginning, those beliefs, those money fears that I had to address. So that was one thing, addressing
Yeah.
like your money mindset and understanding what your beliefs are. Second was developing our financial literacy. And I would probably
Mhm.
say developing our financial literacy was first because that's when I started to realize, oh, I have all these like fears around dinero.
Yeah.
So develop our financial literacy, and there it's like you just are learning a lot of
Yeah.
things. Learning how to budget,
So,
you're learning.
yeah. Oh, no, before, because I'm curious, because I'm noticing que you started this with your partner, your husband, I'm assuming. So you started off the financial literacy and he was like more resisting, like he just, because that's what happened with me and my husband. I'm the one like empezó and then I'm dragging him along and now he's there. So I'm curious like how with
Same.
it happened.
I had to drag him. I logged into his employer retirement account and switched the settings to max it out without
Yeah.
his permission. I don't recommend this. I don't recommend this. We ended up having to be in marriage counseling. I don't recommend it, but yeah, it was very much like we're gonna do this. And he
Yeah.
was like, like not so interested, not so interested. He found it a little tedious, but ahora he's 100% on
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's how mine is a little bit, but I started a little bit before we got married. So then like when we got married, I just ended up taking over. He's like, okay, whatever. And then I finally realized that I can't do everything by myself because I started getting burnt out. And so then I started teaching him like so now he does the budget and he does all that stuff now and I worry on the investing portion. So it's like a tag team. But yeah, I always find it interesting on how couples end up dealing with their finances.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say this in terms of the wealth building cycle, where we have address your money mindset, develop your financial literacy, know your numbers. That was me. I was the one who
Hmm.
was aware of our spending patterns. I was aware of how long it was going to take us to pay off debt, how much we needed to save each month to be able to reach
Hmm.
certain savings goals. I knew our numbers. I knew our numbers really well. My husband, until maybe even 3 years ago, like he would go to the store and you'd ask him, oh, how much was the groceries? Like, I don't know. And he wouldn't even print the receipt. Like he just would spend and not even look at the spending. So he wasn't someone who knew his numbers.
Yeah.
However, the fourth part of the wealth building cycle is increase your income. And
Hmm.
that came from my husband because
Yeah.
I wanted to stick to this. Let's just keep our expenses low. Let's just
Yeah.
keep our expenses low. We can control that. And my husband was like, no, we can increase our income. And
Hmm.
at this rate, we wanted to buy a house in LA.
Hmm.
And he was, this rate is going to take us so long to buy a house because we only have this amount of extra cash flow. Like we have
Hmm.
to increase our extra cash flow, and there's a limit to how much we can decrease our expenses by. There's no limit to how much you can
Yeah.
increase your income by. But in my mind, I was like, there's a limit. There's a limit to how much we can increase our income by. Like,
Hmm.
because I didn't necessarily have examples of people around me who
Yeah.
had increased their income by so much. But he really focused on that. He really, really focused on that. And now it's part of my program. Right? I
Yeah.
teach people how to increase their income, and it's part of something that we do because there is no limit to how much we can increase our income. So those
Yeah.
four things, money mindset, know your numbers, develop your financial literacy, increase your income. It's a cycle. And I call it the wealth building cycle. And
Hmm.
it's simple. It sounds simple,
Yeah.
but The overwhelmed, exhausted,
Mhm.
overstimulated, burnt out brain will not be able to stay in that cycle.
Yeah, that's true.
When you are tired, you are not going to care at all about reading a personal finance book. If you are overstimulated because of everything that's going on with family or some health stressors or whatever, you're not going to be like, oh, let me reevaluate my money mindset and my beliefs. If
Mhm.
you are just feeling like you're in survival mode, you're not going to be thinking, ahora sí, I'm going to go increase my income. Like it just,
Yeah,
you don't have the capacity to do that. And you're also not going to be able to be like, oh, let me sit down and create a budget and follow the budget because you're just too tired, too overstimulated, too overwhelmed.
yeah,
And that's why I started teaching people about diverse self-care
yeah.
because diverse self-care, which is my acronym for the 7 types of
Hmm.
self-care, is what keeps us in the wealth building cycle. And what I realized for myself and from working with my clients is we don't have a money issue. People are not bad with money. People
Hmm.
are bad with self-care. And it's because we're
Yes,
not taught how to take care of ourselves in these 7 ways. And
that's
also
true.
because what we are taught is that self-care is massages and getting your nails done and
Hmm.
things that a lot of times you need money for.
Yeah,
But what I've learned from working with my clients is that self-care, some self-care is instantly comforting. It adds pleasure to your life and you just feel good. A massage can feel that way. Getting your
yeah,
nails done can feel that way. Like you like afterwards you just feel instantly good.
yeah.
But there's also self-care that doesn't feel instantly good, but if you keep doing it con tiempo, it adds so
Hmm.
much comfort in your life. And I call that growth self-care, growth
Yeah.
oriented self-care. So, for example, if you never created a budget in your life and now you're
Hmm.
sitting down and you're reviewing all your statements to create your first budget, it's not going to feel instantly comfortable. It's not going to
Nope.
feel instantly pleasurable. It's going to feel tedious, annoying, like nerve-wracking at veces because you're like, oh, damn, I didn't even know that's how much I spend money, how much money I spend on things, right?
Yeah,
But con tiempo, you develop that skill. You learn how to be so intentional with your money. Budgeting becomes like, oh, let me do it so I can spend money with joy, with pleasure, without guilt, and also save and invest.
yeah, yeah. And I like how it's a little cycle because it is you go through all of that, and I will notice which you brought up, like when you start getting overwhelmed and overstimulating stuff like that. I know that happened, even though I've already gotten good at budgeting and I'm learning finances and stuff like that. You can still fall like out of that cycle when those things happen, which it did when my daughter was born. Because like, oh my God, like I was so surprised on how much work that is, especially with the newborn. And so then guess what? That budget for eating out and stuff like that went out the window because ni yo ni my husband wanted to cook because we were so tired, like zombies from sleep deprivation and then taking care of baby. And so then we're like, okay, you know what? We got to pull back and stuff, and then you had to bring your back, but we couldn't do that until we figured out like a process to get over that stimulate overstimulation and the tiredness. So we had to figure out a routine, and that's helped so much, and now we're able to get back on track. So I like how it is a cycle and you can fall out of it at any point in time with life events that you think that wouldn't.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people, they'll give up on budgeting. They'll
Mm-hmm.
give up on learning certain skills because ultimately, to save, to invest, to pay off debt, we need
Mm-hmm.
extra cash flow. In
Yeah.
order to have extra cash flow, we need to be intentional with our money. In order to be intentional with our money, we have to have the capacity. Like our brain can only handle so much planning in a day, so many decisions in a day. And when we're
Mm-hmm.
tired, when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed out, our brains can't engage in that planning. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the hard part. And that's why I created my acronym, Diverse Self-Care,
Mm-hmm.
to tell people, okay, this is like what you want to be intentional about every single day. These 7 types of self-care. And honestly, what I see with my clients is if they engage in at least 4 of the
Mm-hmm.
7 types of self-care, they tend to be in this like zone of resilience, and they're a little bit more calmer, a little bit more grounded, a little just more capable to stay in that wealth building cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, even choosing to stay committed to your diverse self care routines and engaging in the 7 types of self care, even that requires taking some time to be intentional and
Yeah.
reflect, which can also be really hard when life is lifing. Like
Yes.
the moment I realized, and I realize, everybody, that I keep talking about diverse self care, this acronym of the 7 types of self care, and I still haven't told you what the seven types
She'll
of
get to
self care are.
it.
But I'm going to just tell you, I'm just going to want to convince you guys
Yeah.
a little bit more
Yeah.
about why this is important. So I have been like, I noticed with my clients, like, oh, what are the things that cause them not to do their homework from working with me, right? What causes them not to cancel their subscription or call to reduce their credit card interest rate or
Mm-hmm.
figure out the forms so that they could transfer their 401ks from their current employers to a rollover IRA. What is getting in the way? And what I started to hear is, oh, I was going to do it, but then I got into this really big fight with my husband. Or my mom got sick and she came and stayed with us and I took care of her. And I was like, oh, so our social relationships impact our
Mm-hmm.
ability to stay in the wealth building cycle. Check, wrote that down. Oh, it's because work was really, really crazy. I had a lot of deadlines. Someone quit and now I have to take over the work. And I was like, oh, okay. So things around our careers, our professional development, like that could impact our ability. Okay, write that down.
Mm-hmm.
Vocational. All right. Then I just got really sad. I'm depressed. They would tell me I'm depressed about everything going on in the world. I have so much anxiety. And I was like, oh, okay, so our mental health impacts
Mm-hmm.
our ability to engage in the wealth building cycle. And then they'd be like, I got sick. I got sick with COVID. Oh, and then my kids got sick. And now I just haven't been sleeping well. And oh, my stomach has been hurting me a lot. And I was like, oh, okay, so
Mm-hmm.
our physical health impacts our ability. Oh, I didn't make the call because I couldn't find my credit card because I lost my wallet. Oh, my house is such a mess. I can't find anything in my car right now. And I was like, oh, okay. So our environment and our cleaning routines.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was also just those moments of like, I don't know. I just don't know how to, let's see, I don't know how to contact customer service, or I didn't know the number, or like some like stuff that was like very specific to their dinero. Or if I told them, oh, research auto loans, they're like, I don't know where to. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
so your financial literacy, anything that like your dinero self-care is also going to
Yeah.
impact you. And then, so that was 6 different types of self-care that I identified. And from working with my clients, I also saw that there was some people that like an emergency would happen and they would have to use their emergency fund. And they were very like, oh, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I had this money here and I was able to pull from my emergency fund to pay for the tires. Or I'm so glad I was able to pull from the emergency fund and send my brother some money. But then there was people where life would happen, emergencies would happen, and they would have to dip into their emergency fund and they would have so much anxiety and they
Mm-hmm.
would feel so scared about using their emergency fund. And they're like, oh no. And they would catastrophize of like, oh, this is the beginning of the end. And they would get like that. And I was like, huh,
Yeah.
what causes some people to be like trusting and grateful and some people to get like really anxious and nervous? And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that the people who were able to be trusting and grateful had some spiritual self-care practices. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
always like a religion. It was
Mm-hmm.
also just their connection with the universe, with like
Mm-hmm.
nature. And they just had practices that just allowed them to just feel a lot more trusting
Mm-hmm.
and connected. And so all of that, I was like, okay, so these are the 7 types of self-care. Now, how am I going to remember them?
Yeah.
So that's why I created the acronym Diverse Self-Care. D is the netto self-care. So anything that
Mm-hmm.
helps with our financial security. I is our interpersonal self-care, anything with our social lives and making sure that we have good relationships. B
Yeah.
is vocational self-care, making sure that we don't burn out in our careers. E is emotional self-care, so that we are taking care of our mental health. R is restorative body self-care, anything related to your physical health. S, spiritual self-care, anything around, nurturing trust and faith. And E
Yeah.
is environmental self-care, making sure that you're decluttering and organizing and cleaning up. And so I found
Yeah.
that if people could like engage in those 7 types practice self-care on a regular basis, then
Mm-hmm.
they have the capacity to be in the wealth building cycle, which involves knowing your numbers, reviewing your money mindset, developing your financial literacy, and increasing your income.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So
As you went through those, I just was going in my head of all the examples that happened, even with me, because like I finally, like today, like 3 months later, sent out an email to finally cancel a subscription for home security. I don't even have that house anymore, but it's always been like something else, like because there's always like blocks. I have to call, and I had my husband call, but they didn't freaking like let him do it. And then I forgot because life, like you mentioned, and then I had to call, and then I called, and then there was another roadblock saying, well, you gotta like submit a formal request through email. I was like, oh my God. And then I finally got around to it because I kept forgetting because, yeah, so many of those things, like other things just come up, taking care of my daughter or trying to figure out other things that are a little bit more important than a subscription. But yeah,
yeah.
se me pasaron 3 months that I paid for no
Mhm.
reason. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the thing. One thing about me is I don't do a to-do list anymore.
Yeah.
Every day I create my diverse self-care plan. And that's me
Mm,
writing down one thing I'm going to do when for each of the seven types of self-care.
mm-hmm,
Understanding that I want to have more comfort than growth because you don't want to burn out, right? So it's like I look at it and I'm like, okay, maximum three growth oriented. So if there's something that's tedious for me, right? And like you, it's like making those
mm-hmm,
phone calls and like little paperwork that does impact my dinero self-care. Okay, I write that down. But then that means that
mm-hmm.
for interpersonal self-care, I'm going to make sure that I talk to my comadre for an hour, usually while I'm
Yeah.
folding clothes, which is environmental self-care. And those are like, I don't really like folding clothes, but doing it while talking to my comadre feels a little bit more pleasurable. And I just
Mm-hmm,
also
mm-hmm,
think like, what are the ways that I am going to make sure that I have enough pleasure and joy and comfort for my self-care, and yet also enough growth self-care? Because when we engage in self-care activities that help us grow, it actually expands our comfort zone, which increases our capacity to do a lot more. This version of me, I mean, I was thinking compared to like last year, this time last year, my abuela, one of them had a heart attack. My other abuela, her dementia got really bad. My car got
mm-hmm.
stolen.
Oh
And I
wow.
was like, there's no way that I can engage in diverse self-care. Like there's so much going on
Yeah.
versus in January, I realized like, oh, diverse self-care is what actually keeps me in a zone where I could keep learning, where I can keep growing,
Mm-hmm,
where I do have some joy. And even though in January my brother got sick, I so sick that he was put on a ventilator, and
oh
I was
no.
going to make his medical decisions. And the
Yeah.
thing that kept me able to make all his medical decisions was that every day I was creating my diverse self-care plan.
Mm-hmm,
And now it's become like I know so much how it positively impacts my life that I'm able to navigate a lot. I think of all the uncertainty around the election and
mm-hmm.
everything that's happening in the world. Like there's a version of me that would cause me to be so anxious and so rakati takati.
See.
But now, because of my diverse self-care routines, I'm like, okay, you know what? I know that I'm always gonna take care of myself first. I know that I'm gonna listen to myself and check in with myself about what I need. But it
Yeah.
also took time. It took time to get here because I remember even like my tia once saying like self-care is selfish. And that was something that stayed in my head. Or I'm
Oh.
a parent with two kids.
Uh-huh.
And the idea of like, oh wait, like you're so always supposed to put your kids in front of
Mm-hmm.
you. Or like you're
Mm-hmm.
married and you got to prioritize your partner, or you have your own business. You have to work hard and take care of that. And I was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I did see on your Instagram that you, I think it was on your stories. I think it was today or yesterday. I forgot that you did put your little chart thing, and I really like that. And I was like, oh, I think that's what she's talking about with diverse. And
Yeah, and if
like,
anyone wants to learn more, go to my website, com/freebies. And I
yeah.
have a course on diverse self-care. And I
Mm,
provide the first module for free. So you could learn
mm-hmm.
about the seven types of self-care, get some examples in there, and even learn about growth-oriented and comfort-oriented self-care.
Nice. Yes. Yeah, I'll definitely link that down below so they could go and check that out. Y like, and It might seem like a lot because it's seven, right? Yeah, right. Seven, seven things to think about and work on. And you kind of like touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but like how, like, do you help those that are kind of like, oh my God, that on top, they're already overwhelmed and everything. And now is like, here comes seven things that you have to try to work on. Like, what do you tell those type of people to get them on board?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing when you think about these seven types of self-care, what are the ones that you're already doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone is doing something already when it comes to these seven things. And some of those things already feel natural to you. You know, like for me, I'm somebody that had to be so intentional about making sure to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When I worked as a teacher, I was like always on the go and I would always miss a meal. A veces I would skip breakfast, I'd skip like lunch. There's
Mm-hmm.
people out here that no matter what, siempre comen three times. For
Yeah.
me, that would have been like my first step. Like, hey, let's make sure that you eat three times a day, right? But something
Right.
I was really good at was making sure to walk. That was very
Mm,
like I could always walk. So everyone, even if you're feeling really overwhelmed right now, there are ways that you're already engaging in the seven types of self-care. I hate folding clothes. You might feel like it's an easy little habit and you already have a
mhm,
system in place. You might feel like, oh, I'm not investing, but you're somebody who's really good about putting all your payments on automatic
mhm,
payments and you don't even have to like think about it. So you already have little systems. So the
yeah,
reality is even the most overwhelmed people are engaging in certain types of self-care.
yeah,
Not, then they wouldn't be alive. Like they would
yeah,
literally
that's
like
true.
start to shut down. So I
Uh-huh,
think it's important to acknowledge what are you already doing? And then what do you want to do that's going to add more comfort to your life? Like if
mhm,
you just added one of the biggest ones I feel like with a lot of my clients is their sleep. If they're not sleeping well, then that really impacts their physical health, their mental health, their
yeah,
energy and ability to take care of themselves in different ways. So
mhm,
one of the first things that we look at is like, okay, how are we going to improve your sleep quality? What routines can we put in place in the evening and during the daytime? What are ways that you can, there's teas and different supplements, but learn like there, starting
mhm,
there and getting that sleep is like, okay, we prioritize that. And poco a poco, like it's slow. Poco a poco todo con tiempo, but little steps of meeting yourself where you're at over time, especially
mhm,
like over a year, make a huge difference. I think a
yeah,
lot of times the issue is that people think, oh my goodness, I want to do I want to start investing and I want to get a new job and I want to figure out how to talk money with my partner and I want to run a
yeah.
marathon and I want to start going to therapy to deal with all my childhood
See,
wounds and I want
that's
like they
me.
want to do all of it and all of that like that's growth oriented self-care
Yeah,
and you can burn out from engaged
mhm,
growth oriented self-care. So it's
yeah,
like really balancing like how much comfort and you should have more comfort in your life
mhm,
than growth oriented
yeah.
self.
Yeah, that was definitely me like a year ago or so. I'm still recovering from all that and learning how to do some self-care and let things go and but yeah, I was trying to do everything like real estate investing, then stock investing, learning about other things, starting money chisme and like I realized que like I even like took like courses and everything like that, but like I couldn't even absorb it because I was just doing too much and I was just always tired. So I'm over here in the like the programs and I'm like I can't absorb it. Now I have more ability to absorb it now that I put some stuff away and figured out ways to take care of myself like with the eating. That's me. I forget to eat all the time because I will get hyper fixated on something if I get like editing a podcast or something. Ahí estoy todo el día and then I forget. And then next thing you know, I'm like, the big one has been forgetting to eat dinner and breakfast. I don't forget about lunch for some reason. I guess by the time I get home. Pero en la noche, then my husband has the same issue in the evening, and we're like, I'm hungry. We forgot to eat dinner again because me doing this, him taking care of the baby. And so what we decided to do, we just started ordering meal preps. So now it's easy. Like it's already in there. Malo pones in the microwave and good to go. And so that's been
And what
helping
a
a lot.
wonderful way. What a
Yeah.
wonderful way to use money as a tool to
Mm-hmm.
support your wellness. And that's so important. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about teaching people about dinero because I
Mm-hmm.
want them to have more money to spend on their wellness. I'm
Yes.
somebody who budgets to have DoorDash once a
Mm-hmm.
week at my house. Actually, not once a week. I budget $400 a month for DoorDash. Do I actually spend $400 a month cada mes? No, but I
Mm-hmm.
have it in my budget. And I know, hey, if I need it, if I want it, if it's going to add some extra convenience and
Yeah.
extra pleasure in my life to keep me in my zone of resilience, it's already there. And if we don't use it because instead we are cooking and we've had like a chill week, nobody's gotten sick, there aren't like
Yeah.
all parent conferences and all these deadlines, right? Then
Yeah.
that extra money gets into go into savings or into
Mm-hmm.
sinking fund or something else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad that you're learning to use money as a tool to support your wellness, which
Mm-hmm.
is so important for our sustainability and for our growth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. It I didn't realize like how much self-care went into building wealth and just financial wellness, which is why it's called financial wellness, you know. But yeah, other than that, I know you have, I think I can't remember if it was a workshop or coaching that you have going on right now. And so I do want to give you the opportunity. I know you talked about your freebie, but I know you have some ways that people could work with you.
Yeah. So first, I would say get on my email list. Every
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, I send out an email called Todo con Tiempo Tuesdays. And on that email, I'm just like sharing tips. And if you find those tips helpful and you find and you're learning from that, then to attend some of my free webinars. I host them cada rato. And then I also, for people who then are like, oh, you know what? I'm ready to really commit to developing some new
Mm-hmm.
skills, some new habits, some new beliefs. Like I'm ready for that type of journey. Then I invite you to work with me one-on-one or join my group coaching program, which is Wealth Para Todos Academy. And that's a 12-month group coaching program that
Mm-hmm.
you can learn more about on my website.
Awesome. Awesome. And I'll again have all that linked down below. And yeah, other than that, I am so glad that you came here and shared your self-care to financial freedom because it's true. I love everything like the diverse. I'm gonna be working on that. Like you said, I'm started doing some without even knowing it. Yeah. But other than that, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. Hasta luego, everybody.
Bye. Hasta la próxima. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and share this episode so others can also find this podcast. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias listed in the show notes below, where you can also find resources to help you in your financial journey. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the podcast, you can find that information in the show notes. Other than that, thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.